What's the way out? Either we change the psychology of mind or the physiology of body to put it back on the right track. My name is Ladi Ojas. Welcome to Skeletal Leap, a living adventure. Skeletal Leap transforms one's life into a personal heaven. Today's episode will tell you how I cracked the code of instant sacral chakra opening. First of all, I looked for the exact location of the sacral chakra. I easily found its location at the sacrum. It is a set of 5 fused sacral vertebrae just above the coccyx or the tailbone. It's connected to the pelvis, forming the posteriorly concave pelvic wall that strengthens the pelvic bed. Also, it forms a part of the lower S in the double S-shaped vertebral column. A closed sacral chakra happens when the nerves in the sacral plexus are subjected to long-term compression. It takes place through the dropping of the sacral vertebrae and the resulting distortion in the lower S of the double S-shaped vertebral column. Sacral plexus is a nerve plexus comprising sensory and motor nerves for lower leg and foot, posterior thigh, and partly for the pelvis. It originates at the lumbar and sacral vertebrae, namely L4 to S4. It's a formation that comprises the lumbosacral trunk, the anterior division of the first sacral nerve, and the parts of the anterior divisions of the second and third sacral nerves. The nerves of the sacral plexus meet at the greater sciatic foramen, making a flattened band there. From here, new branches turn into sciatic nerve, ultimately splitting into the tibial and fibular nerves in the posterior thigh. Sacral plexus is positioned at the back of the pelvis and is fed by the superior and inferior gluteal arteries and veins. Constant compression of the sacral plexus results in the suppression of the aesthetic sense of our instinctual structure. The roles of the root chakra and the sacral chakra are just the opposite of each other. The root chakra takes care of the basic survival and material safety or security. Conversely, the sacral chakra is concerned with whatever is beautiful in life and gives it a meaning. Its concerns, including curiosity, creativity, sexual drive, and potency, fill the pursuit of life with joy and passion. I observed all these concerns with an acute sense of perception as I focused my attention to the entire pelvic bed. As I raised my sacrum up, I surprisingly noted my anterior pelvic tilt while opening my root chakra in sitting and standing stances had started disappearing. Although it wasn't still feeling perfect like it did through opening my root chakra while lying down on stomach and jogging on toes, yet it had moved back somewhere in between the anterior and the posterior pelvic tilts. It was like a riddle I was going on solving in its absolute subtleness. I discovered I couldn't open the root chakra in a perfect manner without opening my sacral chakra, exactly like I wasn't able to open my sacral chakra without opening my root chakra alone. And now I was feeling both of them were still imperfect in their opening even in conjunction with each other. The lower S of the double S-shaped spine was still not feeling perfectly shaped. Feelings are not emotional alone. They can be instinctual as well. What is the difference between the two? Or in other words, what is the difference between instincts and emotions? Emotional feelings are there only in the mind, but instinctual feelings may be there in the body as well as in the mind, both together. We often talk about the gut feeling. It's a feeling that we occasionally have in our gut. It's an instinctual feeling. We also call gut to be our second brain. That's why the communication between the gut and the brain is so important. This communication takes place via vagus nerve, passing through the vicinity of double S-shaped spine. I started wondering about the relationship as well as the difference between instincts and emotions. Instincts, in their natural satiation, generate passion and not emotions. Passion is a feeling located both in the body as well as in the mind. It feels like a flow of energy through the body as well as through the mind. But in case instincts aren't able to get satiated for various different reasons, they tend to turn into emotions. Emotions are located only in the mind, although they generate their negative effects on the body. It's because they are not whole. They are only there in the mind. A very good example is the instinct of sex. When it doesn't get satiated in the body in a natural way, it turns into a desire for sex in the mind alone. There it tends to satiate it through mental sex. It seriously distorts the entire energy pattern, which could otherwise have resulted in passion. Now, the same passion gets distorted as an emotion, getting accustomed to doing mental sex more frequently than real sex. It's something like mental masturbation that one tends to get addicted to. We tend to get indulged into it more frequently without really getting passionately satiated. Emotional satiation is never passionate, and that's why it tends to frequent itself more often. Slowly and gradually, this pattern turns into a habit as a vicious circle, and we are no more able to perform the real act of sex as passionately as we otherwise would have done. Symptoms that point to the existence of the sacral chakra, including all kinds of sexual problems like premature ejaculation, impotence, ejaculatory incompetence, orgasmic dysfunction, vaginismus, frigidity, and a poor sex performance owing to the lack of a mature orgasm in men and women are all lifestyle diseases that stem from the sacral chakra. That's what emotions do to us, whether they are positive or else negative. They are not whole, they are fragmented, living in the mind alone. And it's not limited to sex alone. Frustration of any instinct can generate a corresponding fragmented emotion through desire or fear. If these fragmented emotions are generated through desire, they are termed as positive. Conversely, if they are generated through fear, they are termed as negative. But both of them are basically fragmented. In fact, the positive emotions are more fragmented than their negative counterparts. The reason is that desires are always the next step of the fear generated by the instinctual frustration, hence, they are more fragmented than our fears. Instincts include hunger, thirst, excretion, curiosity, movement, playfulness, adventure, interaction, love, socializing, sex, reproduction, and parenting. Emotions always exist in pairs of positive and negative simply because they are fragmented. These include happiness versus sadness, bravery versus cowardice, courage versus timidity, confidence versus diffidence, hope versus despair, excitement versus boredom, attachment versus detachment, anger versus guilt, pride versus shame, anxiety versus depression, and desire versus fear. Desire often turns into greed, whereas fear alone turns to miserly tendencies. Emotions and passion cannot live together. We can either be whole or else a fragmented person. Passion results in joy. Emotion can at best result in happiness. There is a difference between joy and happiness. When joy is there, we simply enjoy. On the other hand, happiness is always there for an imminent hope to enjoy. Joy is not right now there. It's still in the future that we are happy about, even if it's a single moment away. When we are enjoying, we have no time to be happy, nor a need to be so. We are enjoying because we are passionately whole and not fragmented that the need for being happy drives us toward. Sacral Chakra, along with its concern for sexuality, is also concerned about creativity. It comes to a very interesting difference between the two kinds of creativity. If it is emotional creativity, it comes into existence through a process called sublimation. It tends to divert the frustrated sexual energy to create seemingly asexual fictional imaginations that further seem to be great pieces of art. But their source is emotion alone, and they can never be as great as creative pieces of art generated through instinctual insights. It is similar to the difference between an emotional feeling and a gut feeling. How do emotions affect the body? The mind, in its convoluted development along human culture and human society, has fragmented itself into many parts. These fragmented parts are always in a state of war with one another. The result is that they keep wasting their energy. As a further result, the organism is thrown into a state that lacks energy. Anatomically, this shows up as a habitually unnatural posture adopted by the skeleton, especially at its joints. The skeleton does this to itself through the mind by grouping its 360 joints down and tucking them in. In the army training throughout the world, they go a step further in a dangerous way. They train soldiers in tucking the skeleton out while it is still drooping down. No one has yet analyzed that it turns them aggressively violent rather than passively timid. But it has been serving their purpose of turning their soldiers brave, and they are happy with it. This gets further worsened by the muscles in their vicinity getting rigidified and thus changing their habitual anatomy. Both these structural changes affect nerves and blood vessels attached to them, thereby changing their habitual anatomy as well. And this is what gives birth to those infamous closed chakras, or as I call them, just chakras, all along the length of the spinal cord. If we look at it from a neurological perspective, it mainly stops the vagus nerve from carrying signals effectively. They block the much-needed dialogue between the gut and the brain to keep the nervous system functioning properly. That's how the materialistic approach to life looks at it. Let's look at it from the angle of the vitalistic approach to life. Surprisingly, the vitalistic approach also talks of closed chakras along the spinal cord that block the flow of Kundalini. Kundalini is the life energy set to flow through the hypothetical nerve named Sushumna along the spinal cord. The brain works optimally when Kundalini flows unblocked through Sushumna between the root chakra in the vicinity of gut and the crown chakra in the vicinity of brain. The similarity in the physiological descriptions of two diametrically opposite philosophical approaches to life has always intrigued me. Maybe the two approaches are ways of looking into the same reality from two different angles. Time will tell. Regardless, the deformed psychology of the mental structure affects the physiology of the human body negatively. It compromises the capacity of the 10th cranial nerve along with the rest of them to carry signals or to let Kundalini flow in an uninhibited manner. The result is a neurologically compromised nervous system of which the brain is the most central organ. That's how a compromised mind compromises the brain as well. The brain loses its spontaneity to think in the moment as the mind pushes it toward past and future thoughts. What's the way out? Either we change the psychology of mind or the physiology of body to put it back on the right track. If the mind can affect the body negatively, the body can affect the mind as well, and positively vice versa. It was this that I was trying to do at my vertebral joint of the fused sacral vertebrae. But the feeling I was still getting was more emotional in nature than an instinctual one. Physically, it had replaced the thrust of my body weight distribution on my pelvic bed from its tailbone end near coccyx to the center of the pelvic bed. But I got a gut feeling that it was stirring up my emotions more than my instinctual passion in my psyche. Energy was not really rising up to that point through my spine. It was a similar thing that was at times causing an anterior pelvic tilt while I was doing away with my posterior pelvic tilt in sitting and standing postures. But as I pulled my sacrum up, removing its compression, the tendency to cause anterior pelvic tilt even in sitting and standing postures just disappeared. It had moved further toward completing my code of instant root chakra opening. This realization encouraged me to wait for my codes of instant root chakra and sacral chakra opening getting finalized in their completion until I looked for the code of instant solar plexus chakra opening alone. Maybe it would complete my root chakra and sacral chakra opening with an instinctual feeling as I cracked the code of instant solar plexus chakra opening like before. Hence, I suspended my apprehension until I came up back to them after cracking my next code above. What I had reached up to this point of my realization was this. A constantly compressed sacral plexus afflicts the sexual process with various types of sexual dysfunctions. But once the compression is released through raising the sacral vertebrae up in the vertebral column, they start getting relieved. Then it's just a question of keeping the vertebral column raised at its sacral region by making it one's first nature. Download the code of instant sacral chakra opening in the resources section of Skeletal Leap Book 1, available on skeletalleap.com/the mind-body connection. But we need to keep this caveat in mind. The sacral chakra cannot be effectively opened until and unless the root chakra below it is already opened, even if imperfectly. I was ready to move on to the solar plexus chakra now. Thanks for listening to this episode of Skeletal Leap, a living adventure. In the next episode, I will tell you how I cracked the code of instant solar plexus chakra opening. Be a part of Skeletal Leap community. Subscribe to Skeletal Leap newsletter. Click on the link in the description to subscribe.